Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is the story's first episode, in which Iruka takes Mizuki's shuriken to the back instead of Naruto. Naruto loses control and prepares to unleash the Kyuubi, but he is stopped by the hand of his hero before he can tear off the seal. Yondame's Hokage. To show your support, like and subscribe. Let's get this show going. Naruto, in truth, had lost focus on what was going on around him. The whirlwind of thoughts and emotions flying around him were just too much to ignore. He was a fox demon? The same one that had killed the fourth and attacked the village? That was why no one seemed to care? Why he was never acknowledged? At first, he had brushed Mizuki's words off as lies, but mere seconds later it all made sense to him. The hatred directed his way for seemingly no reason, the coldness, the disgust. It all fit with what Mizuki was saying. He was a demon. He had killed. He vaguely recognized Mizuki announcing his attack and launching the shuriken at him, and for some reason, he simply didn't move. Instead he just closed his eyes and waited. It wasn't that he had made a conscious decision not to move, or at least, he hadn't consciously had the thought that he wanted to die. Nor was it that the attack was coming too fast for the blonde Genon to dodge. Were he the introspective type, he would realize that the revelations of Mizuki had overwhelmed him, that they had completely taken his mind away from the moment and distracted him. It was just too much. Thud. The blonde waited for the pain to kick in. He felt a warm liquid splash onto his face, and begin to run across his definitive whisker marks, and surmised it was his own blood. Naruto, you okay? Naruto's eyes flew open, only to be greeted with a bloody Iruka hovering over him, struggling to hold himself upright. He had taken the attack instead of Naruto. You need to listen to me, Naruto, Iruka gasped, struggling for breath. He had already recognized what had happened to him. Mizuki's shuriken had been laced with a fast-active toxin that acts to paralyze the body entirely. He had been hit by it once before, caught in the crossfire on a mission to Rice Country, and so recognized the feeling rather well. This also meant he only had around a minute or so before he would pass out completely after becoming fully paralyzed, leaving him unable to protect his student further. He had to get through to the child, or the consequences could be disastrous. Naruto, I believe in you. You will make Hokage, I know it. He couldn't think of anything else to say, but looking at the young aspiring shinobi's face, he knew he hadn't been heard. Naruto was too torn up, too engulfed in self-doubt to even realize what was happening. Iruka felt his muscles give way as dropped to the ground beside Naruto, unable to remain conscious. The sound of Iruka dropping to the ground knocked Naruto out of his stupor. He knew the scarred Chunin was talking to him, but he hadn't picked up on what was being said. Regardless, the wound from the attack shouldn't have caused Iruka that much trouble. Even Naruto knew that much. Something was wrong. It was then he heard one word, spoken with immeasurable smugness. Poison. Poison that would explain it. Wait, Iruka hadn't moved. He still wasn't. Was he even breathing? Poison. But that would mean Iruka was. For the first time in his life, Naruto was angry. Actually, it was more than that. Naruto was nearly completely consumed with complete fury. He didn't even notice his vision swim red as a vile feeling swept over the clearing, and his body was completely coated with blood-red chakra. Dark whispers filled his mind as his anger grew, and with it, the amount of the chakra poured out of his body. The blonde was struggling to control his own bloodlust when Iruka's words came to him as if from a distant dream. Naruto, I believe in you. That was all it took to push him over the edge. All that was needed for his mind to stop struggling for control, and for him to lose grip on consciousness and allowed control of his own body to slip away. Drip, drip, drip. Naruto was pulled to his feet out of the water by tendrils of red chakra. His eyes were dull and gray, almost as if he were dead. If it weren't for the ragged and coarse breathing, he wouldn't be showing any signs of life at all. What had been dark whispers of rage and violence at the back of his mind, were now full-blown roars that exuded the sheer malevolence of the creature that the 13-year-old now stood before in the dark recesses of his own mind. Come closer, boy. I will end all your pain, all your suffering. All I need is one favor and it will all be better. I promise. Naruto showed no other signs of being aware of what he was being told until he slowly began to stumble forwards towards the great bars that held the creature at bay. Yes, yes. Good. Now all you need to do is remove that piece of paper reading seal and I promise all of your pain will go away. Naruto simply reached for the paper and began to pull away. Suddenly, the blonde tensed as the vibrant blue returned to his eyes. It took him a couple of seconds to regain his bearings and to notice the hand that had prevented him from completely removing the seal from the cage that held back the demon. I really didn't want it to come to this, but I do get to see how my son has grown, so I guess that makes it even. The blonde stared up at the man who had awakened him from his trance, whilst the demon roared in frustration. Yondaime-sama. Now, anyone even remotely acquainted with Uzumaki Naruto would know that he was definitely not one for honorifics. He could face down some of the most powerful ninja the world had ever seen and brush them off with a vaguely rude nickname, and his relationship with the Sandaime Hokage was evidence of that very fact. He was the single most respected and powerful ninja in Konoha. He was their leader, the god of Shinobi. However, despite knowing every jutsu in Konoha, training the Sannin and surviving all of the great Shinobi wars, to Uzumaki Naruto, he was quite simply the old man. So when the same Uzumaki Naruto was faced with Konoha's own Namikaze Minato, the Yellow Flash, it was a testament to Naruto's respect and admiration for the man that all Naruto could muster was an odd Yondaime-sama. Naruto himself was still trying to understand events himself. All he could remember before being faced with the image of the Yondaime was learning the Kage Bunshin and Iruka and Mizuki turning up. The rest of the memories hit him like kunai, each one driving itself deeper into him than the last. That feeling from before returned. He was angry, hurt and confused all at the same time. It began to build once again, and once again red chakra began to creep beyond its boundaries towards the distraught boys. Naruto, you need to calm down. Naruto's eyes darted upwards back towards the Yondaime who had placed his hand on the other blonde's shoulder, and the red chakra began to recede, resulting in another cry of frustration from the Kyuubi. The fourth just nonchalantly looked over his shoulder at the beast, peered back to Naruto and jabbed at the demon with his thumb. He sure is a noisy one, isn't he? What do you say we go talk somewhere else? Naruto could only nod as the Yondaime took Naruto's arm and the two appeared to phase out of existence, causing the Kyuubi to cry out once more. Naruto looked around at his new surrounding quietly. For the first time in his life he didn't have anything to yell about. No message of defiance to scream out to the world. He glanced to the man standing in front of him and didn't know how to react. The Yondaime was standing right there in front of him and he barely even reacted. It was only when the former Hokage began to speak that Naruto even made eye contact with him. Naruto, I know that you've been through a lot tonight. I understand that you're in pain and that you lost someone important to you. But I need you to listen to what I have to say to you. I don't have much time until my chakra runs out and I have to leave, okay? The blonde in question nodded once again, but said nothing. Seeing this, Minato sighed but pressed on nevertheless. First of all, I want to clear up what happened on the night of the Kyuubi's attack. I did not transform the fox into you. I was however forced to use a sealing jutsu to trap the Kyuubi away at the cost of my own life. Unfortunately, a demon of Kyuubi's power is far too powerful to be contained in just anything. To be sealed securely, it need to be trapped inside of a newborn human baby. That baby was you. Naruto's gaze fell downwards again, focusing on where the floor should have been. But I still don't understand, why did it have to be me? Why pick me? But he was interrupted by the late Kage's hand grasping his shoulder reassuringly. Naruto looked up towards the Yondaime, who sported an ever so slightly cocky grin. Well, I couldn't trust such an important job to any old kid. The kid I chose needed to be strong enough to keep that fox locked away for good. So then, who better to choose than my own son? Right, Naruto? Naruto's eyes never left the Yondaime's face. He desperately searched for any trace of deceit in the man's face, but could find none. I'm the son of the Yondaime? Naruto's eyes widened slowly as the news sunk in. Minato grinned even wider when he saw his son's reaction. He had been afraid that Naruto would have been angry with him, or even rejected him altogether. But there was too much Kushina in him. Of course, he had been watching over Naruto all this time. And even though it infuriated him, he could do nothing aside from watch his son endure treatment that would have broken any normal child. Naruto was never beaten, or abused. Even verbally. But some would argue that what Naruto endured was even worse. He was quite simply ignored. As far as the rest of the village was concerned, he never existed. No one made eye contact, no one would talk to him. For years, the closest thing to attention Naruto got. Occasional visits from the Sandaime aside were hushed comments made when the villagers thought he was out of earshot. The tall blonde-haired shinobi's image started to fade, and his demeanor became serious as he realized he was nearly out of chakra. Naruto, I'm almost out of chakra. I need to reseal the Kyuubi's chakra before I run out. His fingertips glowed blue with sealing chakra as he reapplied the seal to Naruto's stomach. Your mother and I are proud of you, Naruto, and we always will be. We'll be watching you when you make Hokage. I love you, son. Naruto rushed at the fastest appearing figure of his father, his arms outstretched, as if he was going to try and grab him to prevent him from leaving. Wait, but his father had already gone, and the formerly white room began to fade to black as if he had been knocked unconscious. The Sun Daime looked at the receding chakra of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto had almost given over to the beast, and Sarutobi had mobilized the full force of his Zanbu to ensure that the tragedy of 12 years ago would not repeat itself. He himself had led the force, dressed in his full battle gear, with his powerful summon Enma at the ready. He had spent the entire journey going over the seals to the Shikifune in his mind, and an Anbu had been dispatched to find an appropriate vessel for the summon. But his thorough preparations had been for naught. He arrived with his Anbu to find that only residual chakra remained around Naruto, a surefire sign that the Kyuubi had been resealed. Of course, that was entirely impossible. Only himself and Jiraiya had the knowledge to perform the Shikifune. "Hokage-sama, what is going on?" The Anbu captain directly to his right asked. The scarecrow-like man was donned in an Inu mask and was, despite his Anbu status, unable to keep the concern out of his voice. There are two possible explanations. One is that the Kyuubi has been resealed, by a seal master. However, the seal would have to be the Shikifune, and therefore only myself and Jiraiya could have been the ones to do it. Well, that's impossible. Jiraiya-sama isn't here, and it definitely was not yourself. Indeed, replied Sarutobi, that would leave one more explanation. And that would be that Naruto himself managed to resist the Kyuubi's power and is forcing the chakra back through willpower alone. Which I'm sure you'll agree, as the two were interrupted by the sound of Naruto collapsing to the ground. Sarutobi and the Anbu captain were there in a flash, to assess the condition of the boy, but were further surprised when the blonde Jinchuriki began to pull himself to his feet. "Man, I feel like I just fell off the Hokage mountain. Everything hurts," grumbled the blonde, whilst rubbing the top of his head and staring accusedly at the ground, apparently not noticing his audience. "Hang on, Iruka-sensei." Naruto for the first time looked up, coming eye to eye with Sarutobi Hiruzen. "Hokage Gigi." "Iruka-sensei," Naruto began frantically. "You don't need to worry, Naruto. Iruka will be okay, he is on his way to the hospital. Now do you mind if I look at your stomach? I just need to check something." "You want to see my new seal?" a relieved-looking Naruto asked. Sarutobi was forced to stop to think about his next move. He knew from an awakened Iruka that Mizuki had told the boy that he had been transformed into the Kyuubi, not that the Kyuubi had been sealed. He also said that the seal was new. That made no sense. There was no evidence that anyone had placed a new seal on him. There wasn't even evidence that anyone but Naruto and the two Chunin instructors had been here. Regardless, he needed to check the safety of the seal anyway. "Yes, Naruto, I need to check it to ensure it is secure." Naruto simply lifted his shirt, revealing the Shikifune, still glowing a deep red. Sarutobi was taken aback. The seal was freshly sealed. Not only that, but it was exactly as it was the night of the sealing, when Jiraiya and himself had checked over it. There were no signs of the usual seal decay that should have been there, and the decay that had already been there. He needed to exactly what had happened. "Anbu, you are dismissed, and shall return to your normal duties. Everything you have seen here is enshrined secret. The punishment for revealing it is, as a result, death. Naruto is exempt from this." And with that he turned to Naruto. "Unfortunately, we need to talk in my office before you do anything else. I know you want to go see Iruka, but it will have to wait. I am certain you understand how serious this situation was, and still is." Sarutobi looked over the boy's tattered clothing, before adding, "You have half an hour to get a change of clothes if you wish." "Sure, Gigi." Sarutobi studied the portfolio open in front of incredibly carefully. Inside lay the images and profiles of some of his most capable, and perhaps more importantly his most trusted shinobi. Should there be a mission of high importance, these were the ninja that would be called upon to do it. Of course there were a range of skill levels and abilities, from Umino Iruka to Hatake Kakashi. Just about every possible mission or task that needed to be undertaken was covered. These were truly his best of the best. However, the latest task that would be assigned to one of these exceptional shinobi was proving to be particularly hard to match a profile to. It was to be a long-term mission of the highest importance, and therefore would be ranked. Meaning the mission details would be off-limits to all but Sarutobi himself and the ninja undertaking the mission. Normally, this kind of mission would be left to the likes of Kakashi, or some of the especially high-ranking Anbu. However, the Cycloptic Jonin was due to take a Jonin team in precisely a week, so he was out of the running. Not only that, but this mission was of extreme importance to the Sun Daime himself, and as much as it pained the veteran Hokage to admit it, there were too few Anbu that he could fully trust, to be able to use one of the higher ranked for this mission. He had narrowed down his choices to two candidates. They were both Tonkubetsu Jonin rank, One was still part of Anbu, the other part of the interrogation and torture department. Both were of adequate ability to fill out the role, however, as memories of both candidates began to fill his mind, one candidate in particular began to stand out from the other. A slight smile found its way onto Sarutobi's face as he rose from the chair in his office. He would have the shinobi summoned immediately. Uzumaki Naruto, however, had a very different dilemma. After his brief conversation with the Sandaime about the events of the previous night, he had been informed that the formation of Jonin teams was being held back by a month. This would normally have outraged Naruto, but after that night's events, even he had reached the limit of his stamina, and therefore the consequences of that particular announcement were not realized until midway through his breakfast. Of course, the realization had not been subtle, and as a consequence he was now being forced to eat breakfast at Ichiraku's. Also, if anyone were to ask if he knew anything about the Hokage's underwear being dyed orange, it wasn't him. He wasn't even there, okay? The delay in the creation of the Jonin teams left him with absolutely nothing to do for a whole month, besides having to meet with the Hokage in the afternoon. And possibly again once the orange underwear he had nothing to do with was discovered. It didn't take him long to set his sights on what he wanted to do. Train. And then train some more. But that led to another problem: what should he focus on? While he was confident of his skills, he wasn't arrogant enough to believe that he didn't have any faults. His jutsu range was decidedly poor compared to the rest of the graduates. Most of the clan heirs had training in their family jutsu as well as the academy jutsu. Even Sakura had a few genjutsu to her name. Not to mention he had no formal taijutsu style to speak of. He knew the katas to the academy style, and could perform them reasonably well. But despite this, every time he tried to spar using the style, he couldn't seem to get the movements to flow together. Whilst he could try and learn some jutsu, or a taijutsu style, these things required a teacher. He would need to find someone who not only was willing to actually teach him, but someone who had the time. The only person who could fit the bill was Iruka-sensei, who had already thrown himself back into teaching at the academy. But Naruto knew what his reply would be should he ask him. Iruka would simply tell him he had to improve his basic knowledge and skills before he could be taught the more advanced things he craved to learn. This led Naruto to a conclusion that he had been trying to avoid: he would have to go back and learn the basics. The blonde let out a groan in between mouthfuls. This was exactly what he had been so happy to get away from, all the boring reading. He couldn't see the point. Stuff from books can't be that important for being a ninja. That stuff was for posers like Sasuke who cared about class rankings. But then a thought crossed his mind. His father. The Ondaime had graduated top of his class, and 2 years early on top of that. Which would have meant that he would have had to have been really good at everything. Even the book stuff. His father had told that he was proud, but would he still be proud if he could see him now? Still in denial about one of his most glaring faults? Naruto stood up as he finished his last mouthful of ramen. He had promised more than once to surpass all the previous Hokages, including his own father, and he wasn't going to stop until he had. And besides, since when did Uzumaki Naruto break his promises? Uzuki Yuiga was staring open-mouthed at the Hokage. Unranked mission? She had never been on a mission ranked as high as that, even with Anbu. And the Hokage had already told her that it would be solo and outside of Anbu, which meant it would go on her official record and be public knowledge that she had completed such a mission. She didn't know whether to be ecstatic or terrified. Now Yuiga-san, I would suppose that you are wondering what your mission objectives are. Correct? Hi, Hokage-sama. Yuiga nodded slowly as she spoke, her anticipation gradually rising the longer the Hokage drew out the conversation. Before I state the mission objectives, I want to let you know that this mission is of great importance to the village as well as being of great personal importance to me. Yuiga visibly gulped. She couldn't fail this mission. She would give her life for both the village and Sarutobi, many times over. Your mission is to firstly train Uzumaki Naruto for the next month. This will go down as once-ranked assignment in itself. For the second part of this mission, you are to protect Uzumaki Naruto whilst he is both in and outside of this village. Any questions before I proceed to explain the mission parameters in more detail? This was not what she had been expecting. She naturally wouldn't say no, not after the emphasis the Sandaime had placed on its importance. She also knew why she had been selected to undertake this mission. She had already spent 6 years in Anbu protecting the child, and had formed some kind of attachment to him, even though they had never actually met face to face. But, she suspected the reasoning behind choosing her was more to do with the fact that she bore no grudges against the boy. Not to mention the fact that she had noticed similarities between Naruto and a certain village leader, and when confronted the Sandaime had simply said, "What a ridiculous suggestion." And even if it was true, such information would be its-ranked secret. It wasn't the words the Hokage had spoken that gave it away, but rather the 10-foot grin he wore where his mouth should have been. Despite this, she had her doubts. She had never taught before, and had no idea how she would go about it. Not only that, but she didn't have a clue what Naruto's ability level was and so had no idea what she should teach him. "Hokage-sama, what exactly would I be expected to teach Uzumaki-san?" I will explain that when I talk about the mission parameters in more detail." "Was that your only question?" Yugao nodded once more, and the Hokage smiled. He was giving her plenty of time to turn down the mission, but she showed no sign of wishing to say no. "So for the first part of the mission you will be expected to tutor Uzumaki Naruto for the coming month. Currently, his academy report states that his skills are way below average in most of the shinobi arts. He has not been able to learn any taijutsu style, his ninjutsu is non-existent and genjutsu is completely out of his reach due to awful chakra control. Finally, his basic academic knowledge is quite frankly appalling." Sarutobi breathed out slowly before continuing. "However, he has an incredible amount of chakra at his disposal. And his notorious ability to prank and evade capture displayed his aptitude for on-the-spot planning and strategizing. On top of that, last night as you know, he broke into the Hokage Tower, evaded countless Onbu scrolls and escaped with one of the most highly guarded treasures here. What you may not know however is that he mastered a prank kinjutsu in under an hour." Yugao had to prevent herself from gaping at the last sentence. It was absolutely incredible that a 12-year-old academy student could pull that off, especially one considered a dead last. "Now Yugao-san, what does that tell you about the academy reports?" "It could mean that they are outrightly wrong, which is highly unlikely. Or, it could mean that Uzumaki-san education was being intentionally stunted." Sarutobi nodded grimly at the conclusion he had reached the night before. "Now I understand that is far too much for you to cover in 1 month. So instead of working on his most glaring faults and weaknesses, I want you to work on giving him an advantage, much like a clan technique would. The brank kinjutsu Naruto learned was the Kage Bunshin. I believe that with a certain amount of thought and consideration, the use of Kage Bunshin in conjunction with his almost limitless chakra supply, could be utilized to create a taijutsu style that is both unique and lethal." Yugao nodded in understanding. With a blonde's chakra capacity, using a highly coordinated Kage Bunshin taijutsu style would not only be plausible, but should the correct amounts of time and effort be put in, it was potentially devastating. "Should we be aiming to turn this into a formal, recorded style, Hokage-sama?" "That is mostly up to Naruto, as it would be his own style." The Sandaime replied before adding, "Although, it would be useful for later on if that were to happen. How about nin or genjutsu?" The Hokage paused before answering, looking slightly reluctant. "Whilst I would love to be able to indulge the boy in ninjutsu, I feel that most would be out of his reach because of his poor chakra control. As a result, I believe that is the other thing I want you to work on with him. Work on getting his control up to par. There is a large probability his sensei will be Hitake Kakashi." Yugao's eyes widened slightly in understanding. Kakashi was renowned for his mastery in ninjutsu, making him the perfect teacher for that area, but there was more to it than that. The Sandaime was giving Kakashi the chance to teach his sensei's son. Moving on to the second mission objective, the protection of Uzumaki Naruto both inside and out of the village. Normally with Kakashi as sensei, this wouldn't be necessary. However, later today I have a meeting with Naruto. There I will discuss whether or not he wishes to release information with regards to his heritage. Should it be decided that the information will be released to the general public, Naruto will become a target. Yugao was stunned. Iwa and Kuma were both famous for their disdain for the Yellow Flash, and they alone were a significant threat. This was before you counted the endless enemies the Yondaime made amongst the criminal underworld. However, this is a separate mission from training Naruto. I have 2 other candidates who I trust enough to carry this out. If you are to accept this mission, I will require your commitment in improving your own skills, in order to be able to combat any threats that come Naruto's way." The Hokage paused before looking straight into Yugao's eyes. "Do you accept this ranked assignment of training Uzumaki Naruto? You will be paid accordingly throughout the duration of the mission. Also, as it is an ranked mission, the details are confidential to all but you and myself." The Sandaime asked, his voice taking on a commanding tone that didn't quite fit the aging man behind the desk. "Hi, Hokage-sama." Yugao replied, slightly unnerved by the fact his gaze never once wavered as she answered. Do you also accept the long-term assignment of protecting Uzumaki Naruto from harm until otherwise stated by the current Hokage? You will be paid for a long-term ranked assignment, and a special commendation will appear on your record upon completion. It took Yugao slightly longer to answer the cage this time, but in truth she had already made up her mind. Hi, Hokage-sama. I accept this was a bit of a background chapter. I needed to introduce Yugao, and part of the Sandaime's plans for Naruto. Oh no, he definitely isn't finished yet. Next chapter will reveal a bit more about the conversation directly after the Mizuki incident. He will also start training with Yugao, and learning with Iruka. Naruto sat outside the Hokage's office anxiously fidgeting, seemingly unable to be still for more than a second. He was waiting for the Sandaime's current appointment to finish, so he could talk to him further about his heritage in the Kyuubi. All that had been said the previous night was merely confirming what Naruto had already found out from his father. The Sandaime was especially adamant that the blonde knew he absolutely was in no way the Kyuubi itself. However, the Hokage had left him both confused and worried about what was going to happen in this meeting. The old man had spent the entire time the previous night, going from looking downright angry to incredibly sad, as Naruto recounted the events of that night, and the reasons behind his thoughts at the time. Although the blonde didn't quite understand why the Sandaime was reacting to his explanation in the way he was, this wasn't what troubled him the most. It was what the Hokage had said as the meeting finished. It was after he had been dismissed and wished a good night, and was on his way out of office, just closing the heavy double doors behind him as he left when he heard the Sandaime mumble in an unusually serious tone. There are going to be some long overdue changes in this village. I won't stand for the blatant defilement of a hero's dying wishes any longer. Initially, Naruto began to conjure up thoughts of the Sandaime ordering the execution of the demon. But as quickly as the thought had slithered into his mind, it was crushed by his own faith in the old man. Regardless, it was a fairly ominous statement and it had Naruto wondering at the possibilities. Fortunately, he was not left to wonder for very long, as his thoughts were interrupted by the telltale creaking of the Hokage's office doors. Naruto looked up in curiosity, to catch a glimpse of the person that the Hokage had been having such a long meeting with, and was immediately drawn to the woman's striking purple hair. He could tell she was a shinobi, both by the hitaye strapped round her left bicep, and the pure white grip of a katana emerging from behind her right shoulder. She noticed him looking, and smiled at him as she walked, causing Naruto to double-take. It was relatively unheard of for a citizen of Konoha that he never met before to smile at him as they passed. In fact, he was pretty sure only Iruka-sensei and the Hokage had done that before. So surprised was he, that by the time he had gathered his thoughts enough to smile back, the woman had already passed by. However, before he could dwell on it, he heard a familiar voice beckon him into the office. He got up, and put on his best grin to hide his slight anxiety. Yugao couldn't prevent the frown from appearing on her face, after seeing Naruto outside of the Hokage's office. He was so taken surprised just because she smiled at him? It wasn't right. She couldn't help but feel a slight twinge of guilt at the fact that she hadn't done any more for him, especially even after she had worked out who his parents were. She could only hope that Kushina-sensei would forgive her. But Oji-san, I thought you said it was a secret? It was made a secret for your own protection. Your father had made many enemies as the Yellow Flash, and most would still be eager to take a shot at him through his only child. However, you are now a Genin, and about to move on to the next stage of your shinobi training where you will be under the supervision of an experienced Jonin. This should deter most potential threats. The Sandaime explained, his eyes monitoring Naruto's reaction carefully. Naruto frowned. It would mean that finally, he had some chance of at least perially gaining the acceptance he had craved for as long as he could remember. A large part of him was screaming for him to say yes to the Hokage that moment, and bask in any newfound acceptance. However, an even larger part had another concern about revealing his heritage. I dunno. I wanna say yes, so I can get the village to recognize me as the super awesome ninja I am. The Sandaime had to bit back a slight chuckle, but could not prevent a warm grin from making its way across his face. But, I wouldn't feel like I earned it. Sarutobi had to stop his mouth from hanging at that. He hadn't expected that at all from Naruto. Ironically, considering who his father was, and his experiences with the child so far, he should have known better. Naruto, you have more than earned a little acknowledgement from Konoha. The way you have been treated since you were born is unacceptable, yet you have weathered anything thrown at you with a smile and a promise to change their opinions. Not once have you shown anger or aggression towards any citizen no matter how much you were provoked. Case in point, I know exactly why you wear the jumpsuit, Naruto. And you know it's not because of the color. The blonde opened his mouth to argue that orange was a kick-ass color, which he truly believed, but a stern look from the Hokage told him that the old man already knew the other reason Naruto wore the poor excuse for a shinobi outfit. Whilst no one had been outright violent against him, that didn't stop people from trying. The stupid ones were dealt with by Anbu, however, a more subtle form of causing the blonde harm was concocted. Rather than outright attack him, they sabotaged his chances as shinobi. Academy teachers damaged his learning, and poor quality gear was sold to Naruto intentionally. He wasn't aware of the majority of this, as it was well under the radar so to speak. One man, however, was not quite so sly. He refused to serve Naruto the clothes he wanted to buy outright, and instead presented him with the jumpsuit. Telling him maybe a foreign shinobi will use you for kunai practice. Wearing that thing there'll be nowhere to run and no way to hide. Naruto had typically retorted with all his normal brashness and bravado, and had stubbornly refused to wear anything else. He would be so good, I won't need to run or hide. Despite his words, what the man said had hurt. It still did, yet he refused to give up on proving the man wrong. He stole a glance up at the sandaime only to go back to staring at the floor in a split second. The old man was still looking at him with that knowing look, just daring him to argue. He didn't know how the Hokage knew about that, let alone seen through his bravado, but he did, and he had, and Naruto could find no way of arguing with the sandaime before the elderly Kage resumed speaking. Besides, I know you're intelligent enough to realize that the entire village will not miraculously grant you their unconditional adoration. More likely, it would mostly level the playing field so to speak. Rather than outright dislike you, you would have the opportunity to earn the village's respect. Naruto frowned as he leant back in his chair. He couldn't argue with the sandaime on any of his points, yet he didn't feel particularly comfortable thinking about what the old man was suggesting. It felt far too much like cheating. Naruto nearly sighed again before realizing just how much he would sound like Sasuke if he did. Eventually, he came to a decision. He looked straight into the Hokage's eyes, and nodded cautiously before speaking. Okay Oji-san, if you think that's what I should do then I trust you. We'll tell the village about my father on one condition. Sarutobi couldn't prevent the surprise from showing on his face, as Naruto yet again came out with the unexpected. He subconsciously edged to the edge of his seat as he awaited Naruto's terms. You have to promise to hand over that hat. And, treat me to all the ramen I can eat at Ichiraku's. The Hokage instinctively palmed his wallet, and clutched it protectively, before an idea formed in his mind. But Naruto, if I were to make you Hokage now, you would be too busy doing boring paperwork to train with the new sensei I found for you. The blonde's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets at the sandaime's words. If he was getting a sensei, that would mean jutsu. Real, kick-ass jutsu like shooting fireballs or making lightning shoot from his fingers. But then he had another thought, as he remembered his time at the ramen stand earlier that day. His taijutsu was shocking, as was his overall ninjutsu. However, he had already realized that despite his wishes to learn more techniques, he needed more basic knowledge about chakra and more practice with seals before he could really start to learn jutsu, and even then it would be slow. A sensei would be able to help him with taijutsu forms and katas, and before meeting with the Hokage he had already spoken to Iruka about having one-to-one lessons to improve his knowledge. Once he had gotten on par with the other children, then, was when he could begin to learn the awesome jutsu that he wanted. Sarutobi watched the young shinobi before him go through the motions in his mon, seemingly having forgotten that the Hokage was even there. Naruto had obviously done some heavy thinking about his skills since the previous night's run-in with Mizuki. The Hokage was already aware of his new arrangement with Iruka, which both surprised and pleased him in equal measure. And as he watched Naruto force back his obvious excitement at the opportunity to learn ninjutsu, a craving Sarutobi recognized well after having trained both Jiraiya and Orochimaru, and truly think about the training he actually needed, he couldn't help but feel proud at the growth that the boy was showing. Ah, I thought you might be interested in that piece of news. Your new sensei is to train you up for the next month in preparation for your placement into a Jonan cell. The Hokage watched as Naruto's levels of excitement began to rise once more. You will meet, and begin working with your new sensei in 3 days' time, as she needs adequate time to prepare a schedule for you. She? Naruto asked, obviously slightly put out that they could not get started right away. Yes Naruto, she. Her name is Uzumaki Uegao and she is an Exambu operative, which means she is incredibly skilled and not to be taken lightly, understand? The blonde nodded, slightly awed by what the Hokage had just told him. Now then, we will discuss the details of revealing your parentage later on. You are to meet Uegao at Training Ground 56 in 3 days. In the meantime, I believe you have an appointment with a certain academy teacher to be getting to. Sarutobi chuckled out loud as Naruto hurriedly excused himself and rushed out of his office, nearly flattening the secretary on the way out. Hokage-sama, it's word from one of Jiraiya-sama's toads. The brunette stepped aside as a small toad hopped from behind her into the room, and left, shutting the doors behind her. Sarutobi turned his gaze to the amphibian, indicating for it to speak. Jiraiya says he is returning home to meet with you personally. It's about Uzumaki Naruto. Sarutobi's eyes widened as he heard the toad's next words. Uzumaki Naruto, and Iwagakure. 2 days later. Naruto sniggered as he laid on his back atop the Hokage monument, or more specifically, atop the head of one Namikaze Minato. It wasn't that he wanted to skip his appointment with Iruka today, it's just that he was absolutely certain that if he spent another minute listening to the scarred Chunin speak about the history of the hidden villages, he would hang himself on the spot. 2 days, and 3 appointments was all it had taken to drive Naruto to this point. Iruka had started him right at the beginning of the academy curriculum, and had him work through it steadily. They were currently about halfway through the first year, and already Naruto had cracked. He had created a shadow clone to attend the lesson, not before violently dispelling 2, who initially outright refused to do as they were told, whilst he had a day off to train and relax. He casually rose to his feet, and stretched slowly before trying to decide what to do next. Maybe he would head to the training ground he was supposed to meet his new sensei, so he didn't get lost trying to fight. The blonde hissed at the pain that flared in his head, as his brain flooded with memories that didn't belong to him. Why did Iruka-sensei have to hit him on the head for? All he had done was pretend to fall asleep as he was talking about how the Nidaime Mizukage fought against the Sandaime, and lost because the Sandaime used his monkey summon. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized exactly where that memory had come from. Naruto was frozen in place, shell-shocked as the possibilities of his new discovery rushed about in his mind. He had gained the actual memories of his clone. The first idea that came to his head was naturally, training. He quickly wondered if he not only gained the memories, but the experience of the clones created by the Cage Bunshine. Would it work to improve his chakra control? Could he use it to help with the physical side of training? Or was it simply memories, that he could use to study, without actually needing to personally study? Would it work with more than one clone at a time? He grinned widely as he placed his hands in the ram seal to experiment. Cage Bunshine no the jutsu was interrupted as Naruto felt a hand grab him by the ear and begin to drag him away from the Hokage monument, literally kicking and screaming. Gah! What the hell? He cried as he fought to gain a look at his assailant. What the hell is right? What the hell were you doing sending a Bunshine to our appointment, Naruto? I had your word that you wouldn't let me down. Naruto had no reply. Iruka-sensei was right. He had promised to take the lessons seriously, and he had broken that promise. It went against everything Naruto stood for. Not only had he broken a promise, it had been to one of the few people that truly cared about him, and Naruto had repaid that by betraying his trust. The Chunin looked down at the blonde in front of him, staring at the ground dejectedly. He could quite plainly see that Naruto felt mortified about what he had done. Iruka had worded his accusation specifically to produce that result. Naruto needed to take this seriously, in order to be even slightly equal with the rest of the graduates. Even so, he couldn't help but feel guilty looking at the child he had come to see as something of a younger brother. He sighed out loud. He must be losing his ruthless streak as a shinobi from spending so much time at the academy. Listen, don't worry about it. We'll just go back now and cover the stuff again. And if you finish it all, I may just take you to Ichiraku's afterwards. Iruka watched the boy visibly perk up, before grinning as if he knew something that the Chunin didn't. Well, about that Iruka-sensei. I just found out something cool about the Cage Bunshine. The Konoha Shinobi Library was completely abuzz with activity. Inside, in the Novice and Academy student section, a dozen orange blurs bounced from shelf to shelf, gathering up books that appeared useful. One solitary figure was directing the veritable army of orange. You heard the boss. Look for the books that Iruka-sensei recommended. 3 of you take stuff about chakra, 3 of you take history, 3 of you take the basic shinobi skills, and the last group take basic strategy and tactics. Even though he was answered with a chorus of grumbles and complaints, the clone that the original Naruto had left in charge was impressed with how impressive the clones were. If this worked as well as he thought it would, Iruka-sensei told him he could probably cover the entire academy curriculum in only a week. Originally, he was going to use more clones, but Iruka-sensei was really insistent that using loads of Bunshine must have some negative side effects, and he should ask the Hokage before using any more than the dozen he currently was. Despite this, the clone was certain that the amount being used at the moment was enough to get the job done. He watched as the clones conquered the study tables in the room, and got to work, each taking a book from the enormous pile they had collected. Once satisfied the clones were working as they should, he turned his attention to his own small pile of reading. Whilst Naruto had pushed ninjutsu down on his list of priorities, it was still eternally fascinating to him. The things that could be accomplished were beyond belief, and even though Naruto knew he needed to improve heavily in other areas before he could begin to learn jutsu, he was still curious. So, as soon as he thought Iruka-sensei wasn't paying attention, one clone was hedged into a perfect copy of the Chunin and given orders to look in the area reserved for Chunin for basic ninjutsu scrolls. As a result, this clone now held a selection of crank ninjutsu scrolls, and the task of committing as many as possible to memory so they could be learnt when he was ready. The clone took a look at the pile before him, and picked a scroll at random. Crank, Fuuten techniques. The clone frowned slightly. It wasn't exactly as cool as fireball and lightning bolts, but there had to be something cool in there somewhere, right? Iruka couldn't help but be impressed at the possibilities of the Kage Bunshin that Naruto had uncovered. It was a pity more Konoha Shinobi didn't have the chakra capacity that Naruto had so that the Kage Bunshin could be utilized correctly. After visiting the Hokage with Naruto about his discovery, they had decided to keep with a maximum of a dozen clones, much to Naruto's frustration. But in turn Iruka had conceded to allow him to use the clones to study, whilst Naruto focused on something else. The clones would work independently, but were under orders to dispel themselves if they encountered something that they didn't understand, or had a question. That way the original would be able to ask Iruka for help. They were also to periodically dispel at different intervals, both to ensure that they wouldn't run out of chakra, and also to prevent an information overload from dispelling them all at the end of the day, a danger the Sandaime had warned them of. Iruka and the original Naruto had decided that since the clones were studying in his place, the two could work on something else. The pair had decided that since Naruto was going to be working with the new sensei the following day, they wouldn't work on anything that would impose on any plans they would have for taijutsu or ninjutsu. As a result, the two were standing in the academy training grounds, having decided to work on chakra control. "Naruto, I presume you're able to do the leaf exercise?" Iruka chuckled as Naruto nodded indignantly, outraged at what Iruka was implying. Iruka just smiled before he continued. "Well then, what we are going to do is a simplified version of an Anbu training exercise." Naruto watched curiously as Iruka produced a bag of ping-pong balls. "Now, what I'm going to do is throw several of these balls to you, and all you have to do is use chakra to catch them, and stick them to you. The exercise gets harder and harder, the more balls I throw. We can treat it like a game, keep count of the amount of balls you can stick to you at once. Once you can stick 5 balls to you at once, I'll buy you 1 bowl of Ichirakus. Once you can do 10, I'll buy you a second, and so on. If you can make 30 by the end of the week, I'll teach you a jutsu. Understand what you have to do?" Naruto nodded eagerly. He could almost taste that ramen, not to mention the fact he had the chance to learn a new jutsu. How hard could it be? The blonde looked at Iruka, signaling that he was ready, and focused on the incoming ball and focused his chakra to his hand as the ball made contact. He grinned widely as the ball didn't fall to the ground. "See? Easy, right?" He held up his other hand and began to focus his chakra in preparation for the second ball. Only for him to lose control of the amount of chakra he was channeling to keep hold of the first, and the ball to propel away from his hand. In his dismay, he completely forgot the second ball, which bounced off of his brow and dropped in front of his feet. Yep. Definitely easy. The next day Naruto couldn't keep the smile off of his face as he headed towards Training Ground 56. Naruto had spent a long time exploring the village as a child, and as such knew that the training grounds were numbered for their purpose. Training grounds 1 through 10 were strictly for Jonin teams to use, 11 through 20 were generally used for ninjutsu and taijutsu, as well as sparring, and 21 through 30 are for weapons practice. After that, the training grounds up to 50 were all reserved for environmental training, the most notorious being Training Ground 44. Otherwise known as the Forest of Death. However, the remaining 8 training grounds were all indoors and guarded by Chunin-level shinobi. Because of this, Naruto had never actually seen inside of them, and therefore had no idea what to expect from his new sensei. The fact that what was done inside the grounds was kept secret and guarded was sure to mean that he was going to be doing something completely awesome, at least in his opinion. Which had him terribly excited to find out what he would be learning. Suddenly, he felt a slight twinge in the back of his mind as clone's memories entered his mind. Naruto's grin spread slightly wider. His clone had finally fully memorized one of the jutsu from the Fuuten scroll. Fuuten, Guko. It looked completely kick-ass on paper, the only disadvantage being a slightly longer than usual seal sequence. The last 3 seals were used to keep with the dangerous wind chakra from damaging the user's mouth. This, however, was something that Naruto could work around with practice. What wasn't so easily workable was the fact his chakra control was still too poor for him to learn any crank jutsu. He had asked Iruka the previous day, what level should his chakra control be at for him to be able to learn a crank jutsu properly. Iruka-sensei had said that he should be able to stick 30 balls consistently before he could use a crank jutsu to its maximum potential, which was why he had offered to teach Naruto a jutsu should he manage to get that far before the end of the week. It was only Monday, and as the blonde managed to get the hang of the exercise, he had steadily begun to progress. He had managed 7 by the time they had decided to call it a day, and Iruka-sensei had promised him another control exercise to practice alongside the first, once he had finished his training with Yugao. The blonde picked up his pace as the indoor training grounds came into view. They were enormous buildings, tucked away on the eastern side of Konoha, out of the way of the rest of the village. They were semicircular in shape, and the roof appeared to be corrugated iron. All in all, they were as formidable as he remembered them being, even though he was years older. He slowed to a walk as he approached number 56. He showed the Chunin guarding the buildings only entranced the vivid red permission slip, and continued on through the door. Once inside, the Suntob-jinan couldn't prevent a gasp from escaping his lips at what he saw. The floor was lined with lush-looking synthetic grass that looked and felt entirely real. The only giveaway being how entirely perfectly kept it was, considering that this was a training ground. Over to his left was a small lake, with a small waterfall running down a rock face which was gradually collecting algae. On his right, the grass abruptly came to an end about 20 meters away, and in its place was a barren-looking landscape decorated by several rock formations. The blonde child couldn't help but whistle at the scale of his surroundings. "It's impressive, isn't it?" Naruto whirled around to confront the voice, that seemed to have come from behind him, only to be confronted with the purple-haired woman he had seen leave the Hokage's office a few days beforehand. "Uzumaki Yugao. A pleasure to meet you." Naruto paused, panting slightly, whilst uncharacteristically considering his next move. His new sensei was good. Like, really good. They had been sparring for around 20 minutes now and he hadn't managed to land even one hit on the woman. She was relentless too. Constantly pushing him, probing him for weaknesses in his form and forcing mistakes from him every time he went on the offensive. And not a single error or slip in his defenses went unpunished either. Every time he presented an opening it was ruthlessly taken advantage of. Quite frankly, he was running out of ideas, and already he could feel the slow onset of fatigue, a relatively alien feeling, and one that he hadn't been forced to experience too many times before. Uzumaki Yugao, on the other hand, had an entirely different train of thoughts. On the outside, the polite smile she seemingly always wore when her face was not covered by an Anbu mask, was kept firmly in place, refusing to slip as she seamlessly blocked a sloppy attack after sloppy attack from the blonde in front of her. It was a wonderfully easy way of masking her emotions, as the smile fitted her physique and demeanor perfectly. Whilst wearing that smile she was the docile, polite and kind girl that never had a bad word to say about anybody, that was constantly underestimated by enemy shinobi. After all, how could a harmless little girl like her be a capable shinobi? That of course was before the enemy realized that same harmless little girl had just driven a katana through their chest cavity, brutally puncturing a lung before leaving them to drown in their own blood. So it was fair to say that over her relatively long, for a shinobi, anyway, career, she had perfected that smile and mastered it, until it was just as much of a weapon as her katana. This of course meant that she was incredibly good at keeping that smile from cracking due to her emotions, no matter how strong they were. And make no mistake, despite the frustratingly placid smile she religiously worked to maintain as she sparred Naruto, Uzumaki Yugao was furious. So furious in fact, that the smile had on more than one occasion nearly fell from its place as she carefully analyzed the blonde's movements. It was blindingly obvious to her that he had been sabotaged. The taijutsu he was using was sloppy, almost like a street brawler as opposed to a shinobi. But it was not down to him not having memorized the forms he had been taught, or that he had not worked hard enough to make what he had learned instinctive. His combat instinct was spot on too. He recognized the makings of attacks very quickly and instantly moved to counter. Only to find that he could not move in the way he wanted to, or that his body was in the wrong position to defend himself. His taijutsu was as butchered as the academy records told her. But it had not been butchered by Naruto. All the signs were there, she could see where the corrections to the standard academy forms had taken place. Things that would seem unimportant to Naruto as he learned in practice, But they were things that in combat could mean the difference between life and death. Things like how his left foot was angled 10 degrees further right than it should have been, preventing him from being able to pivot effectively. It was quite monstrous really. They had actively altered Naruto's taijutsu in order to get him killed in the field, and she was willing to bet most of Naruto's other deficiencies could be put down to sabotage. However, this left an entirely new problem. Naruto had worked incredibly hard to make these forms almost instinct, just as he should have done. Which now meant he was going to have to unlearn it, which was both a difficult and time-consuming process. He would have to practice anything she taught him, use it in spars, until it became more instinctual than what he had already learned. "Okay, Naruto-san. You may stop now, I have seen enough," Hokage said, as she eyed the slightly winded boy in front of her. His stamina was good, but clearly needed work on. "Hokage-sensei, you don't need to bother with all that formal stuff. I don't really like it all that much. But Uzumaki-san, that would be improper," she answered, eliciting a loud groan from the blonde. "But if you insist, then I will stick to Naruto for the moment." She paused, waiting for the boy to realize she had been teasing him, and continued just as he figured it out. "Now then, what did you think of our little spar?" The blonde in front of her didn't need too long to come up with an answer. "Well, my taijutsu sucks, I couldn't land a hit on you. I was too slow to react every time you attacked, I could tell you were gonna, and then well, I couldn't move into the right position to do anything about it. You're actually more right than you realize. Your basic form is all wrong, and it is preventing your body from reacting as quickly as you want it to. I was fighting at a Jonan level, you should have been able to do much better. But I made sure my forms were all right. I spent ages with the taijutsu instructor getting them right." Naruto protested angrily. "I'm sure you did, Naruto. Tell me, who is your taijutsu instructor at the academy?" Hokage prompted, already having guessed the answer. It was Mizu. Naruto stopped as the realization hit him. Mizuki had intentionally messed up his taijutsu. All because of that bastard fox. The voice of Hokage-sensei distracted him from his thoughts, and he turned his attention to what she was saying. "Don't worry too much about it, Naruto. This is why I'm here, remember. Perhaps I had better tell you about the secret purpose of these guarded training grounds." Naruto perked up instantly. He had been curious about why they had come here as opposed to one of the other, easier-to-access grounds. These grounds are used by shinobi for one of two reasons. Firstly, they are used by small clans who do not have private training grounds, in order to secretly practice their family techniques. Secondly, they are used by shinobi who are developing their own techniques and need to field test them in secret to prevent others from stealing or copying them. In a village that used to have dojutsu such as the Sharingan, areas such as these became a necessity to ensure privacy. Naruto's eyes widened as he caught on to what his new sensei was telling him. So, after realizing that it would be incredibly difficult to find an existing style that would suit you, the Hokage decided that I would help you come up with a style unique to you. Hence, the secret training grounds. We can't have anyone stealing your work now, can we? Naruto shook his head furiously in disagreement. His own, totally unique taijutsu style? Hokage-sensei was awesome. The Sundaime breathed out a steady stream of smoke as he contemplated how one Uzumaki Naruto was getting along with his new sensei. He had already been impressed with Naruto's progress over the past 3 days. He had discovered the secret behind the Kage Bunshin on the very first day, and had used it incredibly effectively to catch up on what he had missed on the academy. Thus, he had been able to use his time with Iruka to improve his chakra control. He had also been impressed with the amount of maturity that Naruto had shown. He had identified his weakest areas, and had, if somewhat reluctantly, worked furiously to improve himself. But that was not all. Naruto was still 12 years old, and ninjutsu was still ninjutsu. The Hokage had of course, been aware of the blonde's extracurricular ninjutsu studies, and had seen how the boy had not only limited himself to crank techniques and resisted the urge to head straight for ranks jutsu, but he had done nothing more than memorize what he read, until he had developed the appropriate control for the jutsu in question. Fuuten, Guko, a crank wind technique developed by Sarutobi Asuma. However, what is not commonly known was that the Ondaime had spent an entire year just before he became Hokage with various shinobi of note, developing ninjutsu with them. Asuma had been one of those shinobi Minato had worked with, and Fuuten, Guko was the only crank jutsu the duo had come up with, instead focusing on producing a slew of rank Fuuten jutsu. It was practically his birthright to learn it. I've just seen something very interesting at Training Ground 56. Sarutobi looked up tiredly to see his student jumping down from his usual perch on the window. Ah, Jiraiya. You finally came. What the hell is the point of this again? The Naruto clone grumbled, his hands fixed into the single ram seal required from the Kage Bunshin. You understand the basis of the style we're going to try to create, correct? Yugao questioned, patience not faltering, despite the fact that this wasn't the first time one of the Kage Bunshin she was working with had complained. Yeah, it's going to be based on using pairs of Kage Bunshin to create a flexible and maneuverable style that combines power, speed and unpredictability. The clone replied in a sing-song voice, almost as if it was reading from a book. Correct. Now, how much control do you have over where your Kage Bunshin appear? Almost none. The clone answered, knowing it had already been defeated. He watched as Yuagao's grin became slightly smug. Control over when and where your Bunshin appear is vitally important for this to work. That is where you come in. You are to practice focusing on where the Bunshin appear in relation to the original. The second clone is working on being able to delay how quickly the Bunshin appears, allowing for even more unpredictability, a key element to the style you are trying to create. The Bunshin muttered and grumbled under his breath, and whilst Yuagao suspected what was said wasn't exactly polite, the clone got back to work, focus, at least momentarily, renewed. She glanced over to the original Yuagao, who was working with another slightly larger group of energetic blondes, teaching pairs of them a single set move. This was the term she gave to the fundamental movements in almost all taijutsu styles, basic punches, kicks and blocks, the building blocks of hand-to-hand combat. Naturally, he took to this far easier than he did perfecting the nuances of the Kage Bunshin. Its benefits were far more apparent. All the same, it was astonishing how quickly he learned when he set his mind to it. You're seriously thinking about putting on a team with Kakashi and the Uchiha? The Sannin inquired, as if the mere suggestion of doing so was entirely ludicrous. It's the best team for him. We can't break up other, cohesive units just for Naruto's benefit. It would destroy their functionality. Where else would he fit Jiraiya? The Hokage questioned, an unusual glint in his eye, as if he had just come up with something thoroughly cunning and evil. By the way he was openly smirking at him, Jiraiya wasn't sure he wanted to know. Sensei, Uchiha Sasuke is an exact mirror of my bastard of a teammate. I would bet all the smut in the world on him going the same way. Itachi wasn't even half as arrogant as that kid is. That in itself kills any chances of those two developing any kind of teamwork. Sure, Naruto would try and form a bond, but the Uchiha would never reciprocate it in the same way. On top of that, you've got Kakashi. He's under duress from the grizzled old bastard Dansu, as well as half of the damned village, to focus on Sasuke, even at the expense of his other teammates. It's not the kid's fault, and I know all too well that he's chomping at the bit to teach Naruto. But Naruto isn't as stupid as he comes across. He'll spot what he perceives as favoritism almost instantly. It just doesn't work. Neither does putting him anywhere else Jiraiya. The Ino-Shikacho combination is completely impractical to separate, and Kuroni's team of the Hyuga, Inuzuka and Aburame is pretty much perfectly balanced for a recon team. Team 7 isn't just the logical choice, it's the only choice. The Sandaime took a breath as he looked at the growing frustration on his former student's face. He cared so much for the boy, but had always found a reason as to why he couldn't get involved with him. Sarutobi suspected that it was initially his grieving that prevented him from taking in his godson, who bore such a striking resemblance to his father. Then, as time passed, and Naruto's life became progressively worse, it was guilt that kept the Sannin away. That and the fear of rejection. Which was entirely natural when you thought about how Naruto could potentially perceive events. No matter, it was time for him to go in for the kill. Of course someone could take the boy as an apprentice. Jiraiya looked like he had just been winded. He opened his mouth repeatedly, before closing it immediately after, genuinely lost for words. Naturally, the council would fervently oppose such a suggestion, but there would be nothing they could if, say, one of the Sannin wanted to. Sarutobi placed a great emphasis on the word Sannin, driving his point even further home. Finally Jiraiya had collected his thoughts enough to actually speak. Absolutely no way. I can't teach him. What about the spy network? Someone needs to keep an eye on Orochimaru. Besides, I swore I wouldn't take another pupil after Minato, and I meant it. The kid would probably hate me anyway, once he learns what I am to him. Jiraiya paused, somewhat startled that the last sentence had left his mouth. I just can't. If there's nothing else, sensei, I need a drink. Jiraiya didn't wait for confirmation before leaping from the window by which he entered. Sarutobi didn't stop smirking. He knew his pupil would come around. What do you mean sealless jutsu? Naruto asked whilst scratching the top of his head, his face scrunched in confusion. Yuagao frowned, as he saw yet another example of Naruto's lack of basic education. The theory behind sealless jutsu had been covered in the 4th year of the academy. Whilst Naruto had been catching up at an incredible rate, he was still midway through the 3rd year of the curriculum. An incredible feat, considering he had only been at it for a week. Admittedly, his success was partially down to a little known fact about the shadow clone that was one of the reasons the technique was so chakra-intensive. The clones the technique produces have a single-minded focus on the task given to them by the creator. The clones Naruto had been created lacked Naruto's short attention span and poor concentration. You've covered chakra memory, correct? Yuigao questioned, already knowing the answer. Yeah. It was really boring though, it took my clones a whole day to understand everything in the books. Well, it is a rather tricky concept, even at a basic level. Anyway, sealless jutsu work using chakra memory. You see, you don't actually need hand seals to perform ninjutsu. They are a time-saving technique, as well as meaning that shinobi don't have to perfect mastery over their chakra in order to perform jutsu. First, you have to concentrate on the way your chakra molds as you form the seals. You need to concentrate on exactly how it feels as the chakra molds. You follow me so far, Naruto? The blonde nodded, slowly attempting to process the information he had been given. He had improved in his knowledge over the week, however his practical comprehension of the knowledge needed to be improved. After all, it was one thing to read about doing something, but another thing to actually do it in real life. Finally, Naruto nodded more firmly to indicate his understanding, before asking a question. Yuigao-sensei, what's the difference between chakra control and chakra mastery? Yuigao's smile grew slightly as Naruto asked his question. Not only did him asking indicate he was taking in what she was teaching him, but it told her he was understanding it, at least as well as any other Jonin would. Good question, Naruto. Essentially, chakra control is one aspect of chakra mastery. I don't think there has ever been a shinobi with complete mastery over their chakra, even though some attain near perfect chakra control. Chakra control itself is how efficiently we use our chakra. Using only what we need with no waste. Naruto nodded once more, already understanding the concept of chakra control from his studies. However, chakra mastery is the ability to manipulate your chakra at will. Molding chakra internally with no effort or seals, or using it externally as a weapon. With perfect chakra mastery, in theory, it should be possible to mold chakra in ways that hand seals could never achieve, meaning that jutsu could be created with almost limitless possibilities. Naruto was positively starstruck, as Yuigao explained chakra mastery in more detail. It sounded awesome. It is said that your father, the Ondaime, reached an incredibly high level of chakra mastery. So high that he was able to project seals externally using just his chakra. Naruto gaped at that. He was no expert on Fuin Jutsu, the academy basics covered storage scrolls, and exploding tags. He also knew, after some extra reading, that his father held the title of Seal Master. A prestigious shinobi title that was recognized all through the elemental nations, on par with Sannin, and even Kage. The Ondaime had developed a way of utilizing the more powerful seals in mid-battle, without the use of scrolls or ink, an unthinkable feat. Obviously, practicing to perform jutsu without hand seals, is a small step towards developing such a high level of chakra mastery. It will be a long while before you can utilize techniques on par with the Ondaime. Naruto grinned at the former Anbu, looking ever confident and assured. Yeah, but I gotta start somewhere, right? Of course. Now form some Kage Bunshine. Use only 2 or 3, but use far more chakra to create them than usual. That way each Bunshine will be able to use Kage Bunshine in order to tie and get the feel of how the chakra molds. You'll need to replace the first set of Bunshine regularly, as they will be expending their chakra incredibly fast. Naruto nodded in understanding, before Yuigao continued. You will only practice this for a little while, as it will deplete your own chakra incredibly fast, she continued, making sure Naruto wasn't about to start complaining about having his training time limited, before going on. As for you and me, we'll be moving on from basic taijutsu into beginning work on the first stages of your new style, beginning with the stances. The blonde's eyes widened in excited anticipation. He was finally gonna start work on his own style. Naruto grinned at the Chunin standing in front of him, who was wearing a rather proud smile of his own. That's 30, Naruto. On the final day as well. Eat that, Iruka-sensei. You owe me a jutsu, Naruto exclaimed, allowing the ping-pong balls to drop to the floor all at once, allowing them to spill away in multiple different directions. Hee, I guess I do. The Chunin replied sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head in a way incredibly reminiscent of the blonde standing before him. And I think I have something in mind. Watch very carefully, Naruto. This is one of my favorite jutsu. It's a crank raten technique. But despite its fairly low ranking, it is incredibly useful when used in combination with Suiton techniques. Iruka flashed through hand seals, as Naruto leant forward in unconcealed anticipation. Raten, Kaminari Muchi. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.